it was like, I guess, when I talk to older artists now about seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan or David Bowie on Top of the Pops in the mid 1970s. It was life changing. And the more that I thought about the industry, the more that I read about the industry, what a manager does, what a record label is, what a distributor does, what's the purpose of radio, how to get a song on the radio, the more I was kind of fascinated with all of it, because it wasn't the industry per se. It was the stories that I was reading behind it. It was reading the manager of Led Zeppelin and all the good and bad things that they did, to everybody, including themselves.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Old Music Matters and That podcast. I'm your host, Brian. And today I welcome a special guest and actually our first music publicist. We welcome Eric Alper. How you doing today, brother?
Your first, what? Did everybody else say, I'll go after him? That's probably what it was. I think I'm your test. So if I do well, then you can invite everybody else on.
That's how it goes there too. But actually, the podcast I normally run has already been with musicians, and a good amount out of the city that you are currently in, Toronto.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, I have a really good amount of people in around Canada as well as Toronto there too, and pretty much all over the world. So I actually have not had a music publicist on, to be honest here too. So this will actually be pretty interesting.
Yeah. Well, let's see how it goes. I'm sure it'll be fine.
I say, we're going live. Fuck it. That whole deal.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you can swear on here. Look at you. Look at you breaking the laws of the internet. Yeah, that's great.
Hey, I have First Amendment rights, or at least I thought I did. So we'll see how it goes. All right. I just don't go too crazy. So, but we'll just do it like that, especially when it's a little joking wise there too. So
yeah.
All right. But I guess first off, how you been recently? What's new?
Well, everything is great. Right in the middle of the summer festival season, which is really amazing this time of the year, especially because it wasn't that long ago where everything got canceled, even though that it feels like it's a forever ago. But we're still feeling the effects of what COVID did to the music industry with all the shutdowns and then reopening up again. We're seeing record numbers at various music festivals. We're seeing extremely record numbers when it comes to the amount of money that people are spending on ticket prices. So that's always nice to see any kind of upswing and upticks when it comes to the music industry, and lots of new releases. And then in a couple of weeks, going to get my first Christmas and holiday releases to start working in July and August. So that'll be really fun. And but everything is great. Yeah. How are you?
I'm doing good. A little hot, but actually we went to Iceland not too long ago, so there's a little difference coming back.
Did you bring back some of that ice for future use? No. That's thinking ahead.
But I brought Puffin back. I would say I brought a little magnetic Puffin in this case, I too. So
I'm sure that puppet is going to keep you nice and cool whenever you need it.
Actually, it was a gift for a friend, so they asked for it. So they decided to be nice. I had a goodness to my heart, that whole deal. So, all right. So I guess let's go jump into some of the questions I sent over to you. So I guess first of all, we'll get to know more about your backstory, and then perhaps we can get some more details about what it's like to be a music publicist on a day-to-day basis. So if that's okay. Otherwise, let's see how it goes.
Yeah.
So,
go for it.
All right. So I guess let's start with your backstory. I guess who is Eric Alper, and I guess how did you get to this point?
I grew up in a family that had a bar in Toronto. The bar is still standing. It's called Grossman's Tavern. Even though that we're not a part of it, some of my earliest memories of being in the bar when I was a kid and watching people dance and sing to the jazz and blues artists that would be playing there, eating the food that was being served. And it was really kind of my first experience with music and seeing how the community gets involved and gets together around music. I was like 5 or 6 years old when I first, kind of my earliest memories of that. My parents kind of worked there for a little bit. My aunt worked there, my uncles, my if you were part of my family, eventually you end up working there. So it was a pretty big deal in my family. And then I've always loved music, and I knew I couldn't play it at all. I have no musical talent whatsoever. And I know people will say, "Oh, yes, you do. You just." I don't. I'm amazing on the steering wheel in my car as a drummer, but if you stick me in front of a real drum set, I have no coordination whatsoever. In my mind, I think I'm great, but in practice, I'm awful. And so I loved music, but I loved the industry, because the industry part of it, even as a kid, watching American Hot Wax back in 1978 when I was a kid, watching it was like a kind of docudrama that told the life of the DJ Alan Freed, who was working in Cleveland and who kind of coined the term rock and roll. So it was a fictional, nonfiction kind of, people that were up on there. But at the end, it all kind of culminated into one of the first rock and roll shows. And up there on the screen was the real life Jerry Lee Lewis and Chuck Berry. And for an 8-year-old kid, these creatures that were up there completely blew my mind. It was like, I guess, when I talk to older artists now about seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan or David Bowie on Top of the Pops in the mid 1970s. It was life-changing. And the more that I thought about the industry, the more that I read about the industry, what a manager does, what a record label is, what a distributor does, what's the purpose of radio, how to get a song on the radio, the more I was kind of fascinated with all of it, because it wasn't the industry per se. It was the stories that I was reading behind it. It was reading the manager of Led Zeppelin and all the good and bad things that they did, to everybody, including themselves. It was, reading about payola in the 1950s and 60s. It was reading about, the distributors and how they kind of controlled what went in and out of record stores sometimes. And so I got a subscription to Billboard magazine when I was an early teen. And when I went to university, I went for English and Mass Comm and worked for the newspaper, had a show on the radio that nobody ever listened to. It was from 2:00 in the morning to 3 on a Tuesday morning. And I think I gave away like $1,000 a couple of times for the first caller, and nobody ever did. So that's how I knew that nobody was really listening. But after I graduated, I started a record label, then a booking agent. And then I loved to do publicity. I loved telling the stories of the artist, the reasons why they created the music, the reason why they wrote that song, what was behind the making of the album or that video, or what they were going through in their private life or in their public life. I loved all of it. And not on the gossipy side. I was just fascinated with the art of making music, because quite frankly, I couldn't do it. So for me, it was all magic. So I got to hang around people that create magic for a living, and I didn't have to kind of struggle to learn how to play an instrument. So I found that publicity was, I picked up on it pretty quickly. I understood it, and I loved it, and I still do. And I've been doing that every day since 1995. And here we are with Bryan.
Yep. And you said 1995, so 30 years later in that case.
Yeah. I mean, it was funny because I caught the beginning of the end is on my first day working for a company called Koch, which was the largest independent distributor of audio and video in North America, before we got bought out by Entertainment One, who had an incredible film studio of Harry Potter and Twilight, among others. I remember my first day back in 1995, one of the labels, it was Beggar's Banquet. The guy came up to me when I first started. He said, "You missed it. You missed it. You missed it all. You missed the big budget. You missed the buying of actual CDs. You missed the fun and the adventure, and now MP3s and Napster are going to destroy the industry, and something to that effect of it. And so he was kind of right in a way. It was a completely different industry after that, but all the technological changes, here we are. We got through them all, and I think that they've made it a little bit easier and certainly a little bit harder for artists to get heard. But the technology always moves the music industry forward.
Yeah, I especially do remember the whole Lars Ulrich, Prince, and all those other guys who were kind of doing the whole opposition, so to speak, right there too, because of the whole thing Napster and them boys were doing, especially the pirating on LimeWire and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the music industry was absolutely in the lowest point in its history, except for, I'm sure during the World Wars when shellac was being used for other methods of war instead of actually making vinyl records or anything like that. It was pretty low, but artists today, I mean, look, back then when I first started, there were very, very, very clear roads to take. You made a cassette tape. If you sold enough of those, you got a CD made. You went out on tour, and then, you made a video. You got your video player on MTV or at Much Music, and then you were a celebrity, literally overnight. And then you just held on for dear life, and you kept repeating that cycle over and over and over again until you died, or until you broke up or stopped. Now there are artists who are, literally making music in their basement. They're mastering it in their basement. They're mixing it online and getting distributor through CD Baby or DistroKid or Indie Pool, and reaching the world that way. And those gatekeepers, they're still there, but not as much, because I think we're all living in completely different silos. We're not all watching MTV. We're not all buying Nirvana and Soundgarden and Red Hot Chili Peppers and Metallica during that time period, 1991. We're buying 73 million different albums and songs and streaming them all for a very limited period of time. So it's amazing that artists can do everything themselves, but their competition is much fiercer. You're an indie artist from Toronto or Boston or New York. Your competition are the Beatles and the Stones and Fleetwood Mac and Billie Eilish and Olivia Rodrigo and Olivia Dean. We're all after the same eyes and ears as everybody else. So it's certainly a lot of fun. But I think for artists, there's different moments of frustration. I think Spotify is one of the greatest things that ever happened in the music industry. It saved the music industry. Without it, who knows where we would have been with all the stealing and illegal downloads? Probably nothing.
Probably so. But maybe it leads to this question right here. So we say last decade, in this case from like the 2010 up till this point right here too. How much has music publicity had changed, I guess, over the last decade from your perspective?
Yeah, it's certainly, I mean, when I first started, I had to send faxes out, and I would literally be doing it manually, sending that press release through the machine, and then following up with the phone calls and going to see people at events and concerts, and kind of schmoozing them that way, and being nice and being kind and being all the things that I love to do anyway, just talk music with people. Now it's a little bit less and more personal. Everything is kind of done by email. My phone only rings when somebody is in jail or somebody dies or there's an emergency, or people just want to talk, which is great. But normally everything is kind of done through email and online. There are some publicists I know who you don't actually speak to anybody. It's all done through their website. There's some Spotify companies that you have no idea, even if it's more than one human being behind it, and they're using AI and doing their work that way. So it's a lot of technological changes that certainly have made it easier for somebody like me to get the job done and to reach the people I want to reach. When I first started, I only kind of worked within Canada. I've always believed that if you wanted to break a country, you have to have boots on the ground in that country. But in the last decade, I'm working more and more with the world. I'm working with media in the UK and the US and Mexico and France and Germany and Ireland. And that's a lot of fun because I'm reaching people that I would never even think about reaching when I first started, even in the last 10 years.
So I guess social media these days, given how much prevalent it is in today's society, do you think maybe it might destroy maybe careers of music publicists, or do you think it's more so in a nice boost, to say the least, with like reaching out and maybe even helping out in some way?
Yeah, I think it all depends on what the artist wants. It's funny because, you can offer all the different things that are out there, even going against the grain of what the platforms and companies want. For example, there's a number of platforms out there that you can pay to get your music heard to various Spotify playlisters that are third party. They're not Spotify or Apple or Tidal. They're people like you and I that may have a playlist that has a lot of followers on it. That completely goes against Spotify terms and conditions of actually paying for service on their site. Spotify does not like anybody using their platform to make money that they're not making money on. Most of this social media sites are like that. Facebook hates to send people to YouTube. Twitter hates any links whatsoever. Instagram does not like Spotify. The artist's job is to keep people on the site that the readers and the viewers and your fan base are on. But yet all those sites exist because the artists want that direct connection to it. So however my job changes, however I think the way that the industry is going, it's kind of irrelevant because the artist is the ones who decide where somebody like me is most needed. 20 years ago, a lot of up-and-coming artists' dream was to get on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine. Now it's forget about that. They just want 1 million followers on TikTok, or they want 1 million streams on Spotify. And that's great. Like that is absolutely viable and attainable. Especially when the next generation or this generation that is now being musicians that are 15, 16, 17 years old, they're getting their news from completely different sources. They're not looking at the traditional daily newspaper or watching morning show television. None of their friends are. But yet where they are getting the news from are from traditional media sources. So if those start to go away, if those newspapers and magazines go away, well, then you've got no credible sources to get your news from in order to post your video on TikTok of you talking about the news. So you never kind of dictate how people should be consuming something. That's usually a recipe for getting it wrong and falling behind. The music industry tried to do that with Napster. They tried to stop MP3s, but they were behind the 8 ball from the get-go. They were slow in figuring out what they wanted out of it, and they tried to dictate for people to pay. But the general public was like, we're not going to pay $37 for a CD anymore with 2 good songs on it. So their response was to start downloading illegally. And their vibe was, well, Dave Matthews Band doesn't need more money. The Grateful Dead doesn't need more money. Well, they kind of do. Nobody wants to go to work and leave money on the table. I don't. I'm sure Robert Plant doesn't. I'm sure the next independent artist who kind of wants to break a big doesn't want to do that either. But the audience will kind of dictate how they want the industry to go.
Hey everyone, Brian right here. If you enjoyed this little conversation, be sure to subscribe here on YouTube for other future highlights, as well as other future episodes with other musicians from around the world. Otherwise, you can catch us on our Patreon page where we do other interviews, as well as behind-the-scenes content with music publicists, conductors, music educators, music therapists, and everyone else in the music industry. So make sure you check that in the description where you can find the link to my Patreon page. So until next time, keep listening, keep learning, because all music matters in that. So stay tuned, y'all.